Okay, no, we're recording now. First presenter tonight is Karla Loring. And Karla has been at the Museum of Contemporary Art for, she's going to tell us, I'm guessing 5 years. And she's in charge of all the publicity and the media relations and all those things that the museum doesn't pay cash money for. That she's a lot about, you know, interfacing with the community and interacting on social media and getting the attention out and being an interface with people in the community. I think that as you'll get to know Karla and listen to what she says, you'll realize that, you know, the museum is a really accessible, friendly, open place, and that Karla is a good conduit for that kind of an experience. She also works directly with artists a lot in presenting material for their exhibitions, and as a result of that, has a lot of advice on how people should be working with artists. Karla, take it away. Tell us a little about yourself and then jump in.
Okay, and I wanted to say, if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and you know, let me know as we go along. If there's anything you don't understand or want some more information on as we go, that would be great. Basically, here at the museum, we have a department of what's called communications and community engagement. And I always think about the fact that once an artist is fortunate enough to get a show at the museum, I think the big difference is whether they've, met with and talked to the communications department. It will make or break what happens to you at really any place that you're showing your work. So being really aware of what's going on with that is very important. So I have kind of a tutorial, what I call a tutorial for you tonight. And basically it starts with, as an artist, you're your own small business. There's a quote by Jeff Koons, and he said, artists may be considered right-brained thinkers to create their work, but you have to be left-brained about yourself as a business, because that is what you are. And we can look at Jeff Koons. I mean, he's a person who has 100 people working for him in his studio. I mean, he's really made a business out of what he does. And maybe not everybody will reach that, but it's that mentality that really will push what you do forward and get you to the next plateau. So I want to just, throw out a couple truisms just before we get started. I just want everybody to know that when you are an artist, sometimes people just feel like they're very excited just to give a show, and maybe that's enough. But you have to go out there and ask for what you want, and know what you want, and knowing what's possible to get is very important for you. Realizing that wherever you're going to, especially a museum, very short on time and resources, and that's why all the more reason why you have to have all of your information and your materials ready for every opportunity that comes up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give some tutorial advice for every point of time. We're starting with before anything happens, before you get your show, what you should be doing. And the first thing I have to stress, number one, is getting your photos together. I would say that about 80 to 90% of all of the artists that we work with don't have photos of their work. Of course, the
wait a minute, you guys, time out. Karla just said 80 to 90% of museum exhibited artists are ill-prepared with photographs in advance of their exhibition for promotional purposes. All of you better be better than that.
I mean, you have your big name artists and they have a gallery who's going to take care of that for them. But when we're talking about the artists who have to supply their own images, almost never happens. And from there, we start. And, what makes a good photograph? That would be first. So you just don't want to, take anything with a camera. You really want to think about the composition. You want to have a white background, whatever type of art you have. You want to make absolutely sure your photographs are high resolution, and that means 300 dpi. Please write that down, because 72 doesn't work for anybody. 300 dpi and 4 by 5 inches is the absolute minimum that we can use. You want it to just be in a simple JPEG or TIFF file. Don't be, all fancy, get bitmaps and all of that. It just doesn't work. And most importantly, something that a lot of artists forget, the photograph must be of work that's in the show. We don't want work from 10 years ago. We don't want something that doesn't really connect with what your style is. It really has to be the work that's going to be in the show. In terms of marketing, if people are trying to get your, get an ad out there, get your things in some type of postcard, something like that, you have to think about the orientation of your images. Is it horizontal? Is it vertical? Do you need 4-color? Can it be in black and white? Are you prepared to have writing over your images? These are all just things that are going to happen to your work. And it's best
Let me interrupt a second, Karla, okay? The subplot here is that all of you artists are ultimately responsible for your careers. And even if you have a working relationship with a gallery that is working with your museum, you are still ultimately responsible for your career. And you either need to insist that the gallery conforms to the kinds of things that Karla wants, or you got to make sure they provide it to you, or you actually take care of it yourself. It's important. I'm sorry, Karla, go ahead.
Oh, no, great. Number 2, second thing you have to have ready is your biography. And this is just like one paragraph, but this is something that everybody needs to talk about you. What I would suggest is having a friend or an editor read this over, because, it really has to be concise and accessible and talk about who you are and what you've done. Having some type of a CV or a resume that shows all the places that you've shown and articles written about you is extremely helpful. All of that is things that we can build research on and talk more about your work. The more that we can talk about your work, the better it will sell. Because until we get the breakthrough for you, like with a writer or television or something, you won't even be able to do your interview until we get that. So the better that we know you, it's extremely important. The third is the artist statement, and that's really the statement about your work. What I would have for that is 2 versions. The first is when you're thinking about the art world. People who are fellow artists, scholars, critics, curators. If you want to speak, in essays, catalogs, that kind of thing, that kind of artist statement is very handy to have, but also one that's very accessible. You're probably all aware of the fact that across the country we've lost almost all of our visual arts critics. So now we're dealing with a huge team of feature writers. These feature writers don't know a lot about art, and they will quickly misrepresent everything that you do. So that's why you really want to have everything down on paper, to be very clear about what you do and what you want to get across, what's important to you. If you have series of works, you write a short statement about each series. So those 3 things, the photos, the biography, and the artist statement are absolutely mandatory. I don't think I've ever encountered one artist yet who's young, emerging, coming out, who's had all of those prepared for us.
You didn't take this course before you got in touch with them.
That's right. But the other things that I would stress to have, I would absolutely say that you should have a website. My favorite websites are those that just have great images. You just have a slideshow of your work, and then your artist statement, and then some information about where you've shown, that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be fancy, but very rarely do we ever encounter artists who either they don't have it, or they have a blog maybe they're writing on, which is fine, but really to look at their work and to talk to people about their work, you don't have that place to reference. If they have had it, they haven't shared it with us, so that's another problem. If you're not sharing it, then we don't know about it and it doesn't really exist. But on your website, I would have it just very clean, simple, easy to navigate. You don't have to spend a lot of time and resources on it. Just make it very clean and simple. Next thing, the 5th thing is social media. I just went today to a really excellent presentation about Google+. I don't know if anybody's part of that yet, but it really is kind of the future where a lot of I think social media is going to take place. They have things like Hang Up and Huddle, so you can get together and Skype with people. You can text back and forth in groups very easily, and you form like these circles of people. And these circles can be extremely beneficial to you as an artist. You can put your little curators in one. You can have your writers that may have been interested in you that you'd like to reach out to in another. It really helps you to clarify everything that you're doing and keep things clean and organized. So I would highly recommend getting onto Google+ if you haven't already. Facebook, still a very valid, excellent place to network. And Twitter, the same thing. If you have a blog, that's great. Anything that you can where you can engage in the dialogue. It's very important to be out there, to be networking, and to be part of that dialogue, not just talking about your own work, but commenting on other people's work. People who you may have a genuine interest in, writers who are out there commenting on what they're writing. The network effect is extremely important for what you're doing. Razorfish did a study that was just in The Economist recently, where they said that small businesses, which is what you would be, are experiencing the biggest impact from social networking. And the best thing about it is it takes no budget. I mean, it does take time, it takes some resources, but really this has become an essential part of what you're doing, is that sense of networking. Having people get out for your show, you know, telling other people that your show's going on, it's extremely important. And the final thing for advanced preparation is to get engaged in terms of reading, in terms of the internet, newspaper. Look at other artists whose work is similar to yours and note which writers are writing about them. And then, you know, these are people that you'd want to approach. It's just like, you know, having your own small business is thinking about the future of who might be writing, and you have to have all of that prepared in advance. It's really essential. Going to other people's opening, going to events that are related to your work. If, for instance, we had a woman who was in Paul's last webinar where she works with science and math, and she was attending all these really interesting events on that and getting connected to that community, who was also very interested in art. So she could draw upon, you know, multiple communities, which was great. Networking in any type is really essential to getting the word out when you have the exhibition. So now you get to the exhibition, and what most artists do is they just communicate with the curator, and they think that person is the conduit to everything, and that's who they're going to deal with, and that's it. And that's a huge mistake. The curator is great at what they do, but the problem is when they have to translate for you and become a middleman, that's when it all gets muddled. I'm not sure why it is, but in terms of being an artist, what you need to do is get to meet every marketing and media person you possibly can. Sometimes it's one person, sometimes it's a few different people who each, you know, are in a certain area. Try to meet all of them and get information on what they're doing and what they need right up front. I mean, the second you know you have a show, I would go and meet them. It's essential to everything that you're going to be doing after that. For instance, I'll start with the media and the press people. Early because publications have deadlines of at least 3 months out. That's for your typical magazine, and most things are in, you know, they're planning. So the sooner you meet with them, the better. You really need, you know, ideally 6 months out, you're starting to tell them what you're up to, having them start to pitch what you're doing. That's really essential. You want to make sure that we have writers thinking about your work and being ready to review it before it even begins. You want to give suggestions about all those writers that you've been looking at and seeing, you know, what they're writing about and suggesting them. Your hometown, where you're from, those type of newspapers we can look at. Any types of blogs that you like to read or potentially interested in you. So all of that kind of back and forth and contact information is really great. The other thing is when you're going to be in the galleries, what kinds of things are easy to sell? There's artists that come in and we barely have to lift a finger. And it's partially because of what they've chosen to do for the show. For example, we have a design show up now. It's called We Are Here, and it's about art and design. And James Goggin, our design director, had invited 4 different design groups. The first one was Object Design League, and they could have made anything, but they chose to make these crazy balloons. And this was just absolutely fun, and it was just an interesting talking point. You may have seen the other day that we had Mark Hanforth. He's an artist from Miami, and he installed these huge works of art out on our plaza. And this really interesting little bent hanger, which is just like a fascinating thing for the public. That was an easy sell. If you do something where you're doing installation art of any kind, what people can do is, knowing that in advance you're going to be creating the work, have people be able to come in and see you in the creative process. That's very important. People feel like they're participating. You'll have a much better connection to your audience. Mark Bradford did that when he was here. He created this large project in our atrium that was fabulous. Luke Toyman, he also came in and he painted these murals, and people could watch them up on the list and doing their work. So if you're trying to ever think about, like, what's a hook? I just do these paintings. That's a huge hook, is letting people watch you at work. And then a good media person will create a whole event out of that. And you wouldn't believe how much more publicity that you'll get from something by just talking to people early and figuring out something that you can do to make your work a much broader appeal. In terms of marketing, you want to make sure that they're getting out ads, postcards, anything and everything about you. And the funny thing is, you know, what you don't maybe appreciate is you just have to ask. People are very busy. If you've made a personal connection and you're asking for things, believe me, people respond. It's just something, you know, it's human nature. So if people have a one sheet so they can, you know about you and everything, they'll make that postcard and they'll spend the money and the time to work on something with you. So you set up a timeline for yourself at this point, now that you have a show. You send out your emails, your Facebook updates, your evites, all of that yourself. And then one thing that I found that a lot of artists tend to do is that they end up, because they're very eager to show their work, they end up getting multiple shows at once. A huge mistake, because we have so many times an artist finally gets this wonderful opportunity to be able to do a show, and they're not available for interviews because they're working on another show, and they haven't had time to really work on their photos and everything. So you really want to time things and think about, you know, your artistic shows as your career, about that timing. You want to be able to devote yourself completely to each and everything you do. So even though it seems like it's wonderful, you have all this bounty coming in at the same time, we have so many, especially the younger artists, who come in and they just have everything going on at once, and then they don't do anything well. So planning your time out is really excellent. So many times, you know, if the timing doesn't fit, they'll find a new time for you. You don't have to worry about the fact that you have to double and triple up your shows. You just really need to be available for each one.
Hold on, Karla. I think, you know, you're really demonstrating, you know, the reality that a museum is a living, breathing organism as opposed to something stuck on top of a pedestal, you know, and that there are human beings in there. I think now's a decent moment to stop, inhale for a second, and see if anybody else has questions. So if you guys, let's take a minute. If somebody has a question of Karla before we continue, why don't you unmute yourself and ask?
I have a question, Karla. This is Maeve Mayhew. Of all the marketing events that you do, which one do you think has the best return on investment? Is it public? Is it the press releases? Is it the postcards, the invitations? Because I've had solo shows before, and I do all those things, and it's very hard to track what the return on my investment is. All I know is I'm spending a lot of money on all those things. So what would you say is has the best return on investment, and is there any other marketing ideas that you have for us that we can get the word out about our show?
I would 100% say the best return for your investment is in PR and the media. Once writers pick up on your story and you work with the press people to get that out there, it is by far the biggest return on your investment. I've been reading a lot of stories in the news that are saying that now a lot of advertising agencies are starting to realize this very same thing. Even Bill Gates himself said, if I had $2, $1 would go to PR. There's just no doubt. It takes the least amount of resources, the least amount of budget, and the biggest payoff. It's absolutely incredible how much you can get. And one writer, once that starts to snowball and get going, you can get so many more writers interested. So I would say if I only had time to do one thing, I would spend it sitting with the PR people wherever you're going for at least an hour, get them engaged, and get them promoting you. That's definitely the way to go. It's wonderful to have people at your opening. It's wonderful to attract collectors and things like that. But I think the number one thing you want to do, especially for the future, is thinking about those articles. Later on, when you're planning the next show, or what do you have to show for this show, it's going to be about how many articles, how many blogs wrote about it, how many hits you may have gotten on TV. It's extremely important, and it can sell you for the next thing you do. I mean, I think the other things in terms of marketing are all wonderful. I don't know how much people are looking at ads anymore, especially in newspapers. It's kind of an archaic way to go. I would say probably then after media, I would say social media is the next thing. And then maybe marketing I would put third. It's very expensive. It's a lot of resources. Even museums tend not to, spend that much, especially with emerging artists. But in terms of media, the sky is the limit. And the more you get to know those people, the more payoff it'll be for you.
Karla, can you differentiate between marketing and PR?
I mean, the first way is PR costs nothing. Marketing is very, very expensive. Marketing is buying those ads. It's buying placement maybe online. It's making a postcard, all that kind of thing.
But when you said PR, I assumed you meant hiring a public relations person and having someone do work for you. That's not what you mean?
Well, in almost any place that you're going to show, a gallery or a museum will have a public relations person. So I was thinking that you would go to that person and spend time with them to get them fired up about what you're doing and having all that material ready for them. And they'll be the ones to go out there and sell whatever you're doing.
And if you don't have a gallery and you're not with a museum and you have a one-person show that you've arranged and you're interested in getting, attention, you would hire a PR person or you would do it yourself?
I may hire somebody. I mean, you could learn how to do it yourself, but the problem is you don't have the connections with those writers that we do that come with, years of knowing people and what they're interested in, especially now when you're dealing with a lot of feature writers. And you might not always know who's who, but I've seen some artists go out there and try to do it and have some success. But yeah, if you had somebody, maybe even somebody who would do it pro bono for you, that would be fabulous. So
you guys, if you're making art, you're essentially making currency also, and you have a vehicle that you can use to trade. I've worked with artists who've traded artwork for a car. I mean, it might be obtuse, but you can do it readily. Maze, that was a good question. Does anybody else have another question before Karla carries on?
Well, just to follow up on that, this is Ken. I've had some success doing PR myself, sending out press releases for art events, and the press responds, they do. But maybe it seems a little vain just sending out stuff about yourself. I don't know if some people have a distaste for that. But maybe you can kind of train someone to do it and, get a better price.
Yes. Are now do places that you've done it yourself, but what is the circumstances that you've felt like you needed to do it yourself? Did the gallery not have somebody doing it?
Well, I did it for an art walk that I started, and for some shows I've curated, that sort of thing. And I've done it for myself too, but I think I've gotten on people's nerves sometimes. I don't know, or I imagine I have, because then I'm the self-promoting artist, But maybe you just have.
Well, but that's interesting because as everything evolves in the media as well, I think they're used to now people taking things and trying to do it themselves more. So I think you'll find a lot of feature writers out there who are interested, and that's why it's so important to be looking at writers' work before this moment comes. Then you know who to appeal to and look at what kinds of things that they're interested in, because most people who worked at, let's say, your local newspaper, they've probably worked there for 10 to 20 years. These people have been around. So they're very likely to have a long trajectory that you can learn what they're interested in. And those kind of articles translate into, huge numbers. If you look at, quantifying something as a result of your show, having those kind of articles and showing them to the next gallery is very impressive. So that's why I tend to lean towards the articles and things as being really positive, especially the bloggers too. I mean, never write off a blogger, that's for sure. They have amazing connections. Go to the Examiner, whatever city you're in, and look at those local writers. There's almost always in every Examiner group somebody who's willing to write about you, and they have quite a reach. So just always spending that time to do some research ahead of time or asking people, in the field would be hugely beneficial.
One thing I noticed is that the news articles and some online stuff, they pretty much just used everything I wrote. I was basically doing writing for them. So
They do.
you have to be prepared for that. They're just going to take the whole thing you wrote and present it as their own. But there you go.
They do. That is a really important point. We see a lot of times we'll write a press release and there's any number of sites like Art Daily that just put up your press release. So you want to make sure that everything you're writing is something that you would want published. But a lot of times these writers don't have time to do their own original resource. And that's why I also suggest talking to other people to make sure that you're speaking in a very accessible language for everybody to, you know, to most benefit how if you're going to be writing the press release yourself, looking at how to write those and getting some advice. Usually, you know, there's a lot of people in the community who are spending all their time writing press releases. You know, to edit a press release for me is almost no time at all. I love doing it. I was just doing it for an artist the other day in town who's a transgender artist, and she didn't know how to present herself, and I was very happy to do it. I mean, a lot of people are available if you just ask and, you know, get to meet them and get to talk to them. So any professional advice anybody would want on writing a press release, please feel free to contact me, and Paul has my contact information. So.
That's true.
Well, just to finish up, during the time now you have your show, it's opened, you've had people come out, you want to do interviews with writers. So you have some art critics that may want to show up, some bloggers. You don't just go in there unprepared. Once again, you talk to those media people and the press people and you ask them for talking points. You go over sample questions with them. You get prepared for everything you do because it's the one opportunity for TV and you don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing. So if you get those rare opportunities, you really want to be ready for them. And having talking points in that is exactly what we do. So we're very, very happy to help with that. And you want to, throughout the run of your show, continue to talk to the press and marketing people. So the only problem with, let's say, visual art exhibitions in terms of a gallery or a museum is that they last maybe a month, 2 months, 3 months. And writers can always put that off and say, I don't need to show up. So you really want to build in something that's pressing, like a certain time where you're going to be talking, something that gives it some type of time crunch so that the people have to be there to see something. Or if you're going to perform, even better. People love an artist performing. They love to be in on the creative process. How you work as an artist, I mean, it's really what you need to be thinking about is how can I show people and connect with them the creative process. It's just an instant way to get press and attention. Finally, after your show, you want to think about your career. You want to go back to the press people, ask them for all those articles that came out. Again, do you know how few people ever ask me for a report of everything that happens? Very rare, but I always know that when people do that, that they're putting together something and they're going to be very successful. I had a writer or an artist recently who just went to New York. She was successful in Chicago. She went on to New York, and she wrote saying, do you know some connections there? And I was like, that's so smart of her, because we all know people every place, and it was a great way for her to get introduced to a lot of different writers and people that she may not have known. So keeping in contact with these people is very, very important. So you don't just say, my show's over, I'm leaving. Gather up all those materials, gather up every single marketing material, if it's a magazine, anything that the people put out, get all of that stuff together, be able to send it out to the next place. You also want to make sure that you get photos and videotape of your work as it's installed. Don't forget about any of that, you know. Make sure you got everything together when you're leaving. Make sure those are in high resolution and, you know, you get scans of articles, let's say, in the marketing materials, and then you're off to the next show.
Wow. Which artists that you've worked with in the last year or so have been particularly good?
Now that's interesting. I would, you know, I think that what's interesting is looking at these design artists who are here now, and you think, I don't even see what they do. They, you know, one of these people, they, Golden Age, they had a store. My God, how do they translate that? But yet they made a whole event of what they're doing. And, you know, we work with them to create these kind of events. Mark Hanforth, the fellow who did the large sculptures out on our plaza, the very fun, playful, he has such a personality. He really plays up this kind of role of an artist. He really knows how to talk to writers, makes them feel comfortable, makes them feel that his work is accessible to them. He's, you know, done great with what he's doing. Certainly Mark Bradford is an artist who not only did this exhibition, but he worked with us to find all these ways to go out into the community. He involved students in his work. He went to speak at churches that where he could find people here in Chicago to go to. He went all over the community giving these little talks and things that we ended up arranging, and all because he came here probably a year and a half in advance, got people excited and interested in the show, and got people working for him. We also created a blog for him. So I think it's those people who are asking for things and knowing what they can get are the people who are the most successful. I mean, the problem is, on the other side of that, I see so many times really, really talented artists and nothing comes of it. You know, and I feel like, oh my God, if they only hadn't, you know, spent this opportunity not being ready for it through a whole range of reasons. But it's really important to think about the business side.
Can I ask you about somebody? I don't know. I'm afraid the answer is going to be they weren't so good, and I don't know if I want to ask. But they're people maybe over lunch. Okay, and let's ask people now again if they've got questions that they'd like to ask.
A question.
Yeah, Ken.
About Paul. I want to know the artist if we were going to ask about it.
Oh, we could do this. We could do it subtly. This has to do with the son of an artist who I used to represent, and I'm wondering if because the father's pretty good, the son is good too, or not. So there, I could do it without naming names. But I found it really fascinating that there was a father and son, you know, artist team, not team. They're competing with each other, and it's pretty fun and fascinating. You know what I'm talking about, Karla?
No, I'm not sure, but I do know of other artists who have had, you know, their children. I'm thinking of Katie Noland, who her father's Kent Noland, and you really can use those things, especially if the parent has been successful, and use those things to play off of. It's another hook.
Totally true. How about Lynn? Do you have a question? Lynn Beitzer. But you clicked on your image instead of your microphone? You went and hid?
Yes, that's my automatic shyness. Okay, here I am. I was just wondering if there's any helpful advice on getting noticed and getting in the door of the museum in the first place. In my case, I have a gallery that has been the interface with group shows in some small museums, but it's still a very mysterious process, and if I'm in charge of it, I guess it would help to know what to be doing in interesting museum people and my work that's not offensive to you guys, because you must be bombarded.
And you know, I do have an answer for this, because this often happens. I think artists think the curator is the person I need to appeal to, and it's so funny because Madeline Grinstein, she's our director, and people will just go straight to the top and invite her to come to their opening, and I'm like, what are they doing? There's so many people who work at a museum. Getting to know anybody other than the curator is a huge help to your career. Really, I think some of the most connected people in a museum are going to be in marketing and media. You know, possibly development, possibly design, but anybody that you can meet who works at the museum, they know those curators really well, and so often somebody, even from one of Paul's webinars here, the artist will send me something, and I'll walk it over to the curator with my long explanation and telling them all about the artist, and that really works. I think it really helps. I mean, if they're not interested in what you're doing at that moment, maybe that's fine, but it's so much better than, you know, you're just kind of cold calling by sending something in the mail and then hoping to get it back. But going through any other type of person in a museum is a huge help, and we're very open to it. We love artists. The whole reason why we're all here is the perk of working in a nonprofit is working with artists. We love artists. That's the key, and we want to help all of you. So if there's any way that we can help, we're here to do it. So if you send it to me, I would promise to send it on with a helpful note. So that's what I would definitely recommend is, and when you're sending out invitations to your show, look up other people in those, galleries or museums that are not just the curators, and invite all of them.
It's also the same thing to keep in mind that everybody in the art world is somebody. Even the little person sitting behind the desk that says, "Can I see your checkbook before you walk in?" But that's not what happens in Chicago. But but all of these people, they're going to grow up to be something different, and many of them it's going to be bigger, and it's good to create. You guys aren't all giants yet, and even if you were, you should still treat everybody as if they're people. But some of these people are going to be your friends, and some of these people are going to be able to do things for you and you things for them, I think all those folks are relevant. Karla, you sound insanely accessible, generous, available, warm, welcoming, beckoning. Are you the only one like? Are you the only person like that at any museum in the whole of the United States, or can we extrapolate from you to others?
I believe, I talk to people who are my counterparts all the time, and we all feel the same way. We believe in art and artists. That's why we're here, and we want to help you in any way we can. And even if, for instance, I've had people who send me things that isn't always my taste, and that's fine. I pass it along, and I'm enthused because this is what you do, and this is your calling, and I want to help facilitate that. So I think by and large, you will find very friendly faces in your media and marketing departments, and that's why you should utilize that.
I think Karla's really exceptional. I guess she's not exceptional, but I think she's really exceptional and wonderful. And this is the third time, and I don't know if anybody else has presented 3 times, but this is the third time that Karla's presented because I find, what she says so fabulous and so accessible and so demystifying of the way, I think we all think that museums are something up on the hill, like the Acropolis, and that, humans aren't really in there. Karla, I think, gives us a whole different sense of what's going on the other side of that. And it also goes back to the point that I've made previously that everybody is, everybody's people. Everybody likes to, everybody has an agenda. Everybody cares. Everybody's involved in the art world because they like art. And if they like art, they've got to value artists, or they're only collecting dead artists, and that isn't what's happening at a museum of contemporary art. They're dealing with humans, and it's about relationships and growing audiences, and they have really similar concerns and cares just like you do, and I do, and they do. It's pretty cool. Somebody asked, Maze, go ahead, Maze, ask your question yourself.
Karla, I would like to know if you communicate or speak to collectors or socialites or people who have a lot of influence or money in the art world differently, and if you do, how do you do it? Do you call these people? Someone call them, or how do you invite them to these shows?
I found that by and large, I'm talking about the people here, they are very accessible as well. Again, we have a lot of groups like this Emerge group, and they are dedicated to helping emerging artists. They are very excited about learning about an artist, and they're very approachable. One thing I find is whenever we get like a big article on something, all of these people send me all sorts of notes saying how excited they are about that artist. So I feel like, again, getting the word out and getting articles about yourself makes them excited. They love to see things in print, and they love to, tell their friends about it. So I found that they're very accessible, and they want to know about artists. The key here is that they are wanting to support you. So they're very approachable. If you ask, I think you will get a lot in return. Don't be intimidated.
Say it again.
Don't be intimidated.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because it's the same thing. It's the same thing I was saying earlier. Everybody's insecure too. People at the museum are insecure. Directors of museums are insecure. The president of the country is insecure. John Boehner, I don't know about. But everybody has their insecurities, and and I think that everybody likes compliments, and everybody likes attention from people. Alyssa, you have a question? think you do. Are you there, Alyssa? All right, somebody else while she's thinking about it, or maybe she doesn't, but I saw her hand up. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Please continue.
Okay, my question is about, it's easier for me to figure out what the story of the art I'm making is than the story of me, right? That I think one of the things that seems to be happening is people are so much more interested in artists as people and makers, and at the same time, how do you frame that story? How do you, because I think you have a sense of those kinds of storylines and how they're manufactured in a way that standing inside this, I have no idea.
There is definitely a cult of personality. People want to know about you as an artist. There's no doubt about it. Your story is vital to the story of the art. It's very interesting, though. One thing I probably should have gone into is being open-minded about how we represent your art. A lot of times we find artists and they have a certain way that they really want their art talked about, and yet that's not what we think will be a really exciting hook. And a lot of times if they say we can't use our hook, you'll see they don't get any attention or interest. So really being open-minded to what people with a lot of experience have to say. A lot of times we're just getting the writers interested, and then you can do your interview and you can say whatever you wish. The key is to get those writers interested in the first place. So you do have to give up some control, that's for sure. And in the same way, you do have to kind of give up yourself to the extent of doing interviews and getting people, talking to people and all of that. It'd be nice to think your art would speak for itself, but by and large, people want to know all about you. They're fascinated by artists and the creative process.
Okay, thanks. And it's all about that question, like what's the hook?
What's that?
I know, it's all about, you make an excellent point. I guess the part that's confusing for me is I have no idea what my hook is. I'll talk later. I'll send you a postcard. Maybe you can tell me.
Yes, please do. And you know what? Paul has my phone number. Please call me at work anytime. I'm always available.
Alyssa's asking about 12 by 12 and how does it work? Or maybe the question should be, how did it used to work?
Yeah.
Or maybe the question should be, is what's replacing it and how's that going to work?
The 12 by 12 turns 10 this October, so it's celebrating its 10th anniversary, and we've shown over 100 emerging Chicago artists. Many of them have gone on to great, great things. And after that, Michael Darling, our chief curator, has a new idea. He's changing it, the title, to Chicago Works. He's going to be basically enhancing it and giving it more time. He's going to have each one, instead of 1 month, be 3 months. He's doubling the amount of space. He's making sure it gets 3 educational programs instead of just 1. He's going to be having written material about each artist. And really, Michael has a great idea, is he sees the whole process of how things work, not just about the museum. He wants to make sure that collectors are looking at that work, and that collectors are going to the galleries and buying work by these, our community of Chicago artists. I mean, he really wants to help the whole system to, engage with each other and work together. So the new Chicago Works, I think, will definitely be a big boost to the careers of these artists coming up. But you apply for it the same way. They're very open to artists of any type of media. Whatever you're doing, it could even be music, performance, installation, it doesn't matter. It's the same submission guidelines. It'll just be for a year. And again, you can submit it through me if you'd like.
That's pretty cool. I think this is where I want to butt in and say I had a hell of a lot to do with 12 happening. I lobbied the MCA for 13 years, and I felt like I could raise the money to do it, and I told Bob Fitzpatrick, who is the director, and Elizabeth Smith, who will be presenting to us next week or the week thereafter, I said, I'll give you guys $25,000 if you do an ongoing annual exhibit that shows Chicago artists. And they said, we don't want to ghetto. Richard Francis, who was head curator at the time, said, we don't want to ghettoize people. And define them by being in Chicago. And I said, fine, how about if you show a living Chicago artist and a dead Chicago artist from the collection together and establish a dialogue? And he said, let me get back to you. Do you know the story, Karla? 10 days later, he got back to me and said, Paul, we cannot decide when an artist is dead. He says, are they dead when they stop producing? Are they dead when they stop producing good art? Or are they dead when they die? You know, and finally I said, my offer, I'm taking it off the table in 30 days. And Bob Fitzpatrick said he had been at a museum, I'm thinking the Tate in London, where they did a show once a week. They did week-long exhibits. And he said, if they can do week-long exhibits, we can do month-long exhibits, and we want to call it 12 by 12. Will you help us? And I said, sure, fabulous, you know. And I thought that was great. So that, you know, I think it's had a nice run. You know, I'm a little bit sorry that none of the artists I ever exhibited ever were at a 10 by 10 show. Maybe that's because they would have construed it to be a conflict of interest. You know, and then after that, I went to James Rondeau at the School of the Art, at the Art Institute, and I said, James, I'd like to see you guys do something with Chicago artists. You know what he said? We don't want to ghettoize them. I said, oh my God, here we go again. So finally, when the new wing opened at the Art Institute of Chicago, they now have 2 rooms there that solely show Chicago artists. And, you know, in those 2 rooms, they don't demark them. They don't say these are Chicago artists, but those 2 rooms, ever since they've opened, have always been full of Chicago artists' work. Typically from the collection, I think, but not always. Anyway.
And, you know, it's interesting. I was talking to somebody from the Washington Post recently, and she was talking about their emerging artists group, and she said everybody knows about 12 by 12 in the country. And somebody else in New York was saying the same thing. It has really gotten to be a program that's nationwide recognized as a great program for really helping out artists and, you know, showing people this great new work, not just established artists. So I hope it catches on everywhere.
I think it'd be really cool. My premise is that at least a third and maybe as many as half the people who go to a museum are not from that town, and that they want a sense of what's going on in that town. And if every museum is a cookie cutter, you know, and all of them have got a de Kooning and a Pollock and a Frankenthaler and a Nevelson and a Bourgeois, pretty cool, man. I named 3 women out of 5 artists. You know, if they've all got the same things, it doesn't tell you anything about where you are, you know. I mean, so that I think it's mandatory. The Cleveland Institute of the Arts has a room that's dedicated to Cleveland artists. I didn't know that Birchfield was from Cleveland. I thought that was really fascinating and informative to find out. I hope it happens more. You know, I think you need to have a mix of, you know, international and local, but I think you need to do something as a museum that distinguishes you from all other museums, the same way I recommend that all you artists do something that do work, etc., that distinguishes you and your art from everyone else. I think it's the same notion. You know, you're like everybody else, who cares? You know, I mean, I want to hear your story, not everybody's.
Well put.
Oh, I'm
cool.
sorry.
Karla, I feel like I've taken over. You want to say something to wrap this up a little bit and, you know, reclaim your territory here?
You know, just the fact that if anybody wants any type of advice, you know, please feel free and use me as a resource. I'm always here for you. And anytime you need anything, just let me know. I should text my phone number here.
I can see. Got it? Go ahead. I already threw your email address in there. So I'm going to unmute everybody. No, you just sent that to me privately, babe, and I already had it.
Oh, sorry.
Hold on, I'll just cut and paste it. Don't worry about
Okay.
it. I got it. There you go. I'm going to unmute everybody, and then I'm going to ask. Oh, Ken asked asked me what defines a Chicago artist. You know, that's a really interesting question. I think a Chicago artist is an artist who has or is working in Chicago and still feels a connection to it and wants to say they are a Chicago artist. Mark Staff Brandl is in Switzerland, but still would define himself as a Chicago and as a Peoria artist who just had a show at the Peoria Art Museum with some friends of his from college. He's in his 50s. You know, I think Chicago imprints artists. So, you know, if you accept that imprint, I think, and you define yourself as one, I think you are. I mean, I think also someone could say it has to be someone within a 90-mile radius, but I don't quite stick with that definition. I'm going to unmute everybody, and I'm going to ask a question. Okay, you're all unmuted now. Isn't Karla wonderful?
Yeah, great.
All right, Karla. Thank you very much for your value. Oh, I got one more question for you. We're unmuting everybody, and I got one more question. But I got to unmute Karla so she can answer it. Karla, did you type these notes that you spoke from tonight, or were they handwritten? And are you comfortable sending them to me so that I can share them, or do you want to keep it to yourself? And
No. I have them. I have them on a doc, so I'll send it to you.
Fabulous. Send it to me, and then I'll redistribute it.
Okay, I'll do that.
You're one of my heroes. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate it. Karla, good night. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Hold on. Now, they can't applaud because they're all muted. All right, wait. All right, you guys, you're all unmuted. You can thank Karla. Karla, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Karla. Great.
All right, with that, I am stopping this discussion. Hold on one second.